Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Scott Creighton and Gary Osborn. And the topic we're going to be discussing is the search of the lost knowledge of the ancients. And they're going to tell us a lot about this here because a lot of it has been covered in a book that they co-authored called the Giza Prophecy. And I myself have not had the pleasure of reading the book, although I've read the description of it, and it appears to be some very interesting work, and it's some work that Graham Hancock seems to like as well. They can tell us a little bit more about it than I'm going to be able to do it. So why don't I introduce them real quick, and then we'll get them to kind of introduce themselves. Scott and Gary, y'all are with me, right?
Hi, Royce.
Yep. Hi,
Okay.
Royce.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Gary. It's a pleasure to have you guys here. I want to thank y'all for coming.
It's a pleasure
be
to be here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you guys, too. I guess we could start, Scott, with you since you got the picture on the top. Why don't you tell everybody, basically, how did you get interested in doing this research in ancient mysteries in the Giza Pyramid?
Well, Royce, it's kind of a long story. Basically, I've been interested in this field of our past for many years. I think probably ever since I was a small boy. Always been fascinated with the pyramids of ancient Egypt, Mexico, other ancient sites around the world. But it probably wasn't until about 10 years ago, round about that time, that I really got really interested in the whole mystery of ancient Egypt and the Great Pyramids of the Old Kingdom. Absolutely fascinated with them, started reading more about them, read Robert Bauval's fascinating Orion mystery with his co-author at the time, Adrian Gilbert. Went on to read Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. So I've had a fair diet of all those authors, including other people like Michael Bajan, Ian Lawton, Rand Flemath, all these really interesting guys. But for me, it kind of started actually in a funny kind of way. I was writing a screenplay at the time for a film or a 2-hour television drama, and it was actually about the Holy Grail and the Knights Templar, and it particularly brought in. Part of the research for it was centred around Roslin Chapel, which is just about 30 miles up the road from where I live. So I went to Roslin Chapel one glorious Sunday afternoon, fabulous sunny day, and I was there with a friend, and we managed to climb up to the roof of Roslin Chapel, which not many people get the opportunity to do. But it was being renovated at the time, so there was a lot of scaffolding around the building. And so we were kind of wondering about the roof of Roslin Chapel. And I noticed in the southeast corner of that chapel, way up in the roof, and you would never see this, obviously from the ground, but way up in the southeast corner of Roslin Chapel, there's these three small sort of conical shape or almost pyramid shape stones, and they were arranged in the same pattern as the pyramids at Giza, and I thought, wow, that's quite a coincidence. And of course, Giza would be to the southeast of where Roslin is, and these pyramids were in the southeast corner of the the Rosslyn Chapel. So I thought, I wonder why that is, and that intrigued me for a number of months. I started reading more and more about the mystery that Giza really is, and that's really how I kind of stumbled in to this whole thing.
I see. Well, you've certainly done a lot of research into it, though, and it's been a big part of your life for quite a few years now, hasn't it?
It has, but probably not as long as Gary. I have to.
Well, Gary, I think that's your cue to tell us how you got your interest in this here field, and maybe even how you and Scott decided to come together on this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've been a writer on mysticism and esoteric traditions for well over 15 years now. Written and co-written various articles covering subjects relating to ancient mysteries, esoteric traditions, alchemy, mysticism, ancient shamanism. So to put it in a nutshell, I'm interested in the nature of reality and human consciousness, always have been, especially altered states of consciousness. And of course this links in with the so-called paranormal side of things, which I've always had an interest in. But the Giza and the pyramids there, I mean, it's always been a sideline of my research. Until I made a discovery in around about 2000, 2001, where I really focused on it. Anyway, in 2003, I corresponded with Philip Gardner, another author, and he asked me if I wanted to co-author a book with him. He sent me the manuscript he was working on. Anyway, I agreed, and we did 2 books together, The Serpent Grail in 2005 and The Shining Ones in 2006. After that, I kind of dropped out of the literary scene for a while, although I still carried on with my research and tested the reaction to certain theories and discoveries of mine on various discussion forums, which is where Scott comes in. I've known Scott now since 2006 when we were both posting on Graham Hancock's website forum. And he and I noted that what we were researching kind of paralleled and working along similar lines, and that certain discoveries or theoretical aspects from both our work associated with Giza was complementary, as if we each had some of the jigsaw pieces of this particular puzzle.
Yeah.
So I guess it was inevitable that Scott and I would one day be working together. And in 2009, we chatted over the phone and decided that we both work together on a book. And in the last months of the project, we approached author Graham Hancock, and he worked closely with us to make sure that all the research was sound and that he could endorse it. All of which resulted in the book, The Giza Prophecy. It's just been published and with a foreword by Graham. So that's what takes us up to the present day.
So this book has had peer review by its the peers in your field, in other words, or at least one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to Philip Gardner maybe once or twice in my time. I've invited him to my show, but at the time I did, he had a sore throat or was having trouble speaking or something of that nature. And then by the time I got back to him, he was bogged down with his TV show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's right.
But
that was.
Go on. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was probably right about the time when I think that must have been about 2006 when after the book The Shiny Ones had been published, and I kind of dropped out of the scene for a while, kind of a bit disillusioned with it really, but I was always researching, and so after meeting Scott, kind of renewed my interest in the Giza pyramids, and he had something to offer, which I thought I needed to kind of wed my research to, and it's resulted in this book.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, this here's an area of study for me. It has been for many, many, many years. I think it's very fascinating. Kind of like you, Gary, I kind of lean toward the mysticism of the Hermetic tradition and alchemy, and that seems to be a better path for me than religion, in other words.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in a lot of my previous work, and even in the research I'm doing at present, I tend to lean more to the esoteric side. However, to change the view, to change the way we view the pyramids, especially that which we've been indoctrinated with, you know, the established mainstream view that we've been taught in school, Scott and I realised that the only way a so-called alternative history researcher or writer is going to make a change and breach the orthodox wall, so to speak, is to meet the mainstream thinkers and Egyptologists in their own field. In other words, write a serious, well-researched book with good, reliable sources that leans more on the down-to-earth, kind of left-brain, pragmatic side of things, while at the same time meeting them head-on by asking some hard questions about the things they have ignored and cleverly sidestepped these past 150 years or so. Okay. There are many anomalies about the Giza pyramids presented in the book that have been highlighted and expressed clearly, things that need to be addressed and things that these people really can't wriggle out of us, as we have closed many loopholes and have dealt with most, if not all, of their half-baked explanations that are just as ridiculous as some of the claims made by the alternative camp.
Yeah, I've heard some of the explanations, especially from Zoe Hollis, that I thought were kind of out there, shall we say.
Yeah, but there's always a point of balance, see? But when you write a book like this, you really cannot avoid being stereotyped and placed on one side of the field in a conflict that's been going on for decades, between the views that have been established by Egyptologists and the views, claims and beliefs presented by the alternative theorists. Anyway, Scott and I do see the book as a rallying point for the alternative community, and it deals with some of the very difficult questions in the field of Egyptology. However, the ironic thing is, Royce, right now, and which has recently become clear on the Graham Hancock website, where we are now authors of the month this February, and are therefore taking questions from the posters there about the things we present in the new book, is that we're also having to deal with the alternative theorists there, who have always frequented the forum and who feel, quite naturally too, that perhaps what we are presenting in the book might threaten their own views, and theories.
Okay.
And unfortunately, some take it very personally, but, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I've run into a lot of that. Everybody's got their own agenda, their own take, and, it causes a lot of flack out there. Now, one of the things I was going to ask you guys, since I come to realize that you're active on the Graham Hancock Forum Board, are y'all planning on being active over there where people can meet you over there, like the listeners, if they want to join his forum and ask y'all questions further down the road, they can reach you through there?
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely, Royce. As Gary said, we are Graham's author of the month for the whole of February 2012. And if people already have a Graham Hancock board account, they can log in and just go to the message boards, author of the month. We'll be there, taking questions and hopefully giving good and sound answers.
Okay, that's good. And another question I want to ask you, because this is for my own personal benefit. Is Graham Hancock easy to reach through that board also?
Well, Graham, yes. People, Graham is very aware of what's going on his various boards. It's not just a mysteries board. There's science board. There's conspiracies board, so it's, there's several different sort of genres on Graham's site, and he's very aware of what's going on all his board. In fact, he was so much aware that he actually had to intervene in a couple of things that went on today on the board. So yeah, he's very aware of what's going on, and he's fairly active. He can't always be active, but when it matters, he's definitely in and around there, yeah.
Okay. Now, because I may want to join that board myself, is why I asked. But also, real quick, let me mention to all the listeners that each one of you two have got your own website if they want to know more about you. Scott's website is www.scottcreighton.co.uk, and it's below his picture in the description below the chat room. And then the co-guest here, Gary Osborn, his is www.garyosborn.moonfruit.com, and he's also got his link under his picture in the description right below here. If y'all would like to call in, the number is 832-632-7904. And for those of you listening on iTunes, in the archives at YouTube or one of the other places that the show either is now or is going to be, hey, want to come join us and chat live at my site? It's www.paranormalpalace.com. Invite a friend and we'll all get together and we'll have a good old time. To get this thing here started, I want to, get into your book, the Giza Prophecy, because as I understand, you guys have done some work in this here area, whereas you made discoveries that this pyramid actually has a prophecy of things that had happened in the past that would re-happen again in the future. Is that correct?
Well, that's essentially the theme of the book, Royce, or one of the central ideas in the book. One of the things about the Great Pyramids, when we say the Great Pyramids, we're talking really here about the really big pyramids, the giant ones, the of the old, what's called the Old Kingdom, the pre-5th dynasty. Going back to dynasties 4 and 3, we're talking about those pyramids, the first ones, the early giant ones, not the little half-baked pyramids that came much later. We're talking, concentrating on the big pyramids, because Gary and I feel that those particular pyramids had a function and a use that was much different to the pyramids that came much later in later dynasties of ancient Egypt. We feel that the Great Pyramids had a particular purpose that inspired a religious view that then went on to inspire the building of the much later pyramids. Now, it's always been thought by lots and lots of people the world over that, Tutankhamun was found in one of those big pyramids. Well, that's not in fact the case. Tutankhamun is the only king that they've found fully intact in a sarcophagus in his tomb. With all his grave goods. He's the only one. They've never found any other pharaoh like that. But Tutankhamun was found in the Valley of the Kings, about 100 feet underground, in a rock-cut tomb underground, not in a pyramid. They haven't found any pharaohs whatsoever, any kings of ancient Egypt, in any of the early giant pyramids. None. They've found bits of bone here and there. They found in a couple of the Giza pyramids, Menkaura's pyramid, the smaller one of the giant pyramids, that's Menkaura's pyramid, or better known as G3, and they found an intrusive burial in there, as they have also in one of the smaller so-called Queen's pyramids of Menkaura. They found intrusive burials in there. They know these are intrusive burials from the style of the coffin and so forth. They know it's from a much later period. So they haven't found any original burials in any of the old Kingdom pyramids, not one. Even as I say, they found some bones of human bones, fingers, shin bones or whatever, toe bones. They've even found it in the second pyramid at Giza. It's actually the tallest one at Giza, attributed to the pharaoh Khafra, or G2. They found inside the sarcophagus in that pyramid bones, lots of bones, of a bull. The explanation, the orthodox explanation for that is that, they chipped out the king and put in some bull bones. There was some cult that worshipped, or bull worship at the time. So these are, but Gary and I in our book, we explain why, logically and rationally, why there would be the bones of a bull in the second pyramid. Okay. We explain that in our book, and these bones haven't been carbon dated, so we don't even know how old they are. So anyway, there's a big mystery to these ancient pyramids, the Old Kingdom, or what are attributed to the Old Kingdom period, which is roughly about 2,900 to about 2,400, that kind of period, about 500-year period. So what Gary and I have discovered about these pyramids is that if you look at Giza in particular, that they can be shown to conform to a unified design, a preconceived, homogeneous plan, if you like. Now, what Robert Bauval discovered and presented in his 1994 book, The Orion Mystery, he found that the pattern of the stars of Orion's belt the pyramids presented a very good correlation with the stars of the Orion belt asterism. It wasn't perfect, but it was very good. What Gary and I have done and well, just to come back a second, what Robert theorized was that he wondered why was the third pyramid, G3, why was that so much smaller than the other two? I mean, what pharaoh in their right mind would want to build a much smaller pyramid to, their two predecessors? I mean, what would that say about that king? He just couldn't match the greatness of his two predecessors. He wouldn't do that. What Robert suggested was that the star in Orion's belt, which correlated with that pyramid, was slightly less bright, so that was the reason why they made that pyramid so much smaller. Well, what Gary and I have shown in our book is that there's actually a much simpler plan, and it's so simple a child could do it. It's literally dot to dot. You just dot to dot, and you can any three non-linear dots, whether it's 3 points on a blank sheet of paper or 3 stars in the sky, you can take 3 dots, and from those 3 dots, in a simple, systematic fashion, you can create 3 bases. Now, what is remarkable here is that when you take the 3 bases of Orion's belt, the 3 stars of Orion's belt, and you place them on a sheet of paper, blank paper, what you end up with when you follow this very simple systematic technique are 3 bases whose relative proportions agree to an incredible accuracy. Not perfect, we're not saying it's perfect accuracy, but a remarkably high accuracy with the proportions of the Giza pyramids, the main 3 pyramids at Giza. It's astounding. So that was our first kind of clue, like, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. Because if you have a predefined, homogeneous, preconceived plan like that, it tells you there's something more going on at Giza. And I'll maybe let Gary come in here. I'm sure he's got one or two things he'd like to add in here.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on the point that, we had to kind of really, the tomb theory, we had to deal with that first and get that out of the way. That's the reason why that kind of takes up one of the first chapters. And then we could go on to this, the Orion correlation theory and kind of work on that, on Bauval's initial insight. But there's the Queen's Pyramids.
Right.
The Queen's Pyramids, which I think Bauval actually, he did do something with that. But he only works on one side.
That's
Is that right, Scott?
That's right, yeah. Robert recognised that the 3 Queen's Pyramids, or so-called Queen's Pyramids of Menkaura G3, aligned with Orion's belt at its maximum culmination in 10,500 BC or around that time. Gary will explain a bit more about what culmination means and so forth. It's to do with precession. So carry on, Gary, yeah.
Yeah, it's the precessional cycle of 26,000 years, and we found that Scott did actually. I mean, it's two-thirds of the book is Scott's anyway. But the Queen's Pyramids, they kind of marked the precessional minimum and maximum culmination points of the belt stars as they on the horizon, as they set on the horizon and rise on the horizon.
Yeah.
And you've got two eras here, 2 dates, which is 10,460 BCE, when the 3 belt stars were seen to set on the horizon in a horizontal fashion. And then you've got the other three Queen's Pyramids, which are next to G1, the Great Pyramid, which are in a vertical placement. And
they're rotated 90 degrees or perpendicular to the other three, yeah.
Which would relate to the era of 2500 CE in our future. So you've got the two crucial points in the cycle, the end beginning point and the halfway point, and these are marked by the two sets of three Queen's Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. So there you have Orion again referenced in the Queen's Pyramids, but the maximum and minimum culmination points of the three belt stars.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think it does, but I also wanted to mention to you guys, you got a couple of questions, or actually 3 questions pop up in chat that I thought I'd go ahead and bring up real quick before they start piling up on us. Laser, his name's Laser Les Tyndale. He's got a site called Impacto Optics or Impact Optics. He's found some rocks here in America that he says if you use a certain type of technology, you can actually see things referring to the Nephilim in them. But he had a question for you guys, and it's he wanted me to ask you, actually you, Scott, about your Giza pendulum that's aligned to Orion.
Yep. Well, that's really what we're actually just been discussing, Royce. The pendulum is the precession, essentially, of the belt stars. They will basically over a 13,000-year period. They will go from they will set on the southwest horizon or close to the southwest horizon, horizontal. They will set below the horizon in a horizontal fashion. Now, as Gary pointed out, 13,000 years later, at their rising on the eastern horizon, they will be vertical on the horizon. In other words, they will be 90 degrees to the way they set 13,000 years from the past. So basically that's what we have at Giza. The two sets of Queen's Pyramids mirror the processional culminations, the 13,000-year pendulum swing. Now, the thing about the culminations are that these are the furthest points. The stars will have been going from west to southwest. They would have been at their setting. They would have been setting from west to southwest, and then be coming around the horizon over 13,000 years, and then suddenly they'll stop, and they'll stay there for a while. I know this doesn't sound intuitive, but that's what happens. The stars process around the horizon, and then over 13,000 years, and then they stop, and then they change direction, and then they go the other way, back up to the west again. So that's a pendulum swing. So you have a pendulum swing going on at the setting, and you have a pendulum swing going on at the rising, and that is essentially what we're talking about here. Now,
okay.
What's interesting is that the guy in the middle pyramid attributed to the Pharaoh Khafra, he doesn't have any Queen's Pyramids, or what are called Queen's Pyramids. Why not? This guy had 5 known queens. So where are his Queen's Pyramids? There aren't any. The simple fact is, from what Gary and I have researched, is that he didn't have any Queen's Pyramids because they're not Queen's Pyramids. They're culmination end markers. You have, as I said earlier, the stars process around the horizon, stop, and it's that stopping point that the Queen's Pyramids mark. That's the stopping, change in direction point, the culmination point, and it's the same. It's on the southwestern horizon when the setting, and it's on the eastern horizon at the rising. And it's a bit, if you think about, like, supposing you wanted to watch the sun. The sun has got 2 solstices and an equinox. Yeah, every day the sun will rise further around the horizon. and then it will get so far at the winter solstice, it will stop and then change direction and head back north again. And then it will get so far north, rising, that's the summer solstice, and then it will stop. And the midpoint between the sun rising on the eastern horizon is the equinox. That's the same. That's exactly what we have with these two sets of Queen's pyramids, only it's over a much longer period, not within our year. It's a much longer period using the precession of the stars. If you wanted, supposing you wanted to mark a time on a line, what you need to mark time on a line, say you have a line drawn in the sand, and you mark that line is 12 hours, and you mark 12 o'clock at the top of your line and 6 o'clock at the bottom of your line, and you mark a line through the midpoint of your timeline. We can work out, well, we know 12 is at the top, 6 is at the bottom, so that's 6 hours. Halfway, well, that's 3 hours. So we know that 3 hours from 12 o'clock, that would be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's what we have at Giza. Between these two sets of culmination markers, they are connected by a line. It's called the Leonard line. These two culmination markers are connected by this line. And it's a 13,000-year timeline, not a 12-hour timeline, which I just gave as an example, but a 13,000-year timeline. And do you know what's the really remarkable thing about this timeline, Royce?
What's that?
The Great Sphinx is aligned slap bang right in the middle, the center of that line. So that's like just roughly about 6,000 years from 10,460. Take away 6,000 years. It's a little bit more than that, but you get the date of 3980 BC. And that's the date that the Great Sphinx is aligned to in the last or the current precession cycle, because it is a cycle.
Yeah, well, essentially, Giza is a precessional cycle clock.
Yep.
Okay.
Which marks the 2 points in the cycle.
Well, okay, now we're talking about the year 3980. I'm not sure, but wasn't that the same year that the Mayans say that their calendar started, or the Olmecs said theirs started?
Well, it is round about that time. I think it's 2012, and then go back from 2012, where the Mayan calendar is supposed to end. It goes back roughly. I think there's different dates. Different writers give different dates. One date I've been given is about 5,800 years, and what we find in the Giza timeline is that, remember I was given the example of the line in the sand. If you get 12 o'clock at the top and 6 o'clock at the bottom, and you mark a point on that line. If you mark the midway point, we can work out what time that is, because we know 12 o'clock is at the top and 6 o'clock is at the bottom. The halfway point must be 3 o'clock. Well, what we find with this timeline, precession timeline at Giza, is there's 3 points been marked on the line, and we can work out what those 3 dates are. One of the dates is roughly, what was it again, Gary?
10,004. Oh
no, 9700.
Yeah,
9700 is one of the dates. BC. Now, Gary and I, we know that round about that time there was major upheaval going on the planet. The second date that's marked on the timeline is 3980 BC. That's the Sphinx is a straight alignment. And the third date, and we know in 3980 BC, this is a bit more complex to explain, but because it's to do with an axis tilt of the Earth. We know in 3980 BC there was major upheavals going on in the planet as well. And the other date that that we have encoded in the timeline. It's quite remarkable. It was the date of 2012. Now, what can we say about this? It could be a coincidence. I'll say that straight out. It could entirely be a coincidence. The 9,700 date, we know major upheavals were happening on the planet. That's supposedly roughly round about the time Plato's Atlantis went beneath the waves, 9,600. Well, so we're 100 years out there, but
you can only really give approximate dates, really, can't
you? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the 3980 date, we know serious things were going on in the Earth at that time as well, and it gives the timeline points to the date 2012, 2013, round about that time. We don't know if, and we say this quite clearly in the book, Royce, that we don't know if these dates are coincidence or not, but what we find is that it's the only 3 dates that are there that could clearly be interpreted to be there, and 2 of them we think probably are coincidence. We think the date of 9,700 may be coincidence, the date of 2012 may be coincidence. We're pretty sure, however, that the 3980 date has probably definitely been deliberately encoded. The other 2 dates, yeah, they could be. It was a case of, we couldn't leave any stone unturned, and we found these other 2 dates, but they weren't encoded in the line as straightforward as the other date, the 3980 date.
Okay.
But we believe they're there.
I was also going to mention there's another question in the chat room from, looks like Jen. She was saying something to the effect of some people claim that the alien reptilians are from the Orion Belt, and if we notice on the walls of the Gizas, they seem to worship reptilian gods. I guess she's asking you if she understood it correctly that the Egyptians worship the reptilian gods.
Well, we don't really touch on any of that in the book, Royce, because really we've just concentrated on what we feel what's been encoded at Giza.
Right, because different people focus on different facets, in other words, and yours is on this particular prophecy, and somebody else might have focused on that. Yeah,
I can see why. But really we've just focused on what we feel or what we believe the Giza monuments have been encoded with, the information they've been encoded with. I mean, my own work, I really concentrate on the Great Pyramid, on the geometrical, the angle geometry of the Great Pyramid, and I found geodesic angles, which relate to the Earth and the Great Pyramid's own position on the Earth. And my work complemented Scott's, because he actually focused on the Giza Plateau itself and the monuments as encoded with information, which kind of complements my work, So he concentrated on the Giza Plateau, I concentrate on the Great Pyramid, and that's where our work kind of fits together.
Yeah, basically, I think what Gary's saying is that Gary's work focused a lot on. He realised there was a lot of information there about the geophysical condition of the Earth, pertaining to its orbital dynamics, including the axis of the Earth. So Gary found all that, I think, way back in 2000, 2003, something like that. And
2001, yeah. 2000.
Was it getting right? Thanks, Gary. And what I had found subsequently and independently, and without even knowing Gary at that time, was that the so-called air shafts of the Great Pyramid also indicate that the Earth's axis from the latitude of Giza was shifted by about between 6 and 6.5 degrees further south in latitude. We kind of realised that there was a convergence of our ideas, and so we felt that we had to do something together. But back to the point, Royce, was it Jen?
Yes.
Jen. Yeah, about the reptile. It's not something I myself have studied too much. What you find though in ancient Egyptian art is all these reptilian-headed gods and so forth. It's difficult to say really where the ideas for that came from. I think Graham Hancock has done a fabulous book. I don't know if maybe your listeners have read it, called Supernatural, and it basically explores the possibility that the ancient Egyptians used hallucinogens. I think Graham mentions the blue lily was probably the prime candidate for ancient Egyptians to use this. And these are essentially, I don't really want to get too much into this or bog down with this, because it's not one of my theories at all. It's something Graham Hancock wrote about, was that these hallucinogens, these plants were hallucinogens, and basically enabled the ancient Egyptian astronomer priests to go on astral journeys into the astral plane, where they would meet these gods, a bit like the shamans in South America. So that's a possibility. But as I said, it's not something that I myself have researched too much.
Right, I understand. Okay, and also somebody was asking you asking both of you rather, if this information that you got about the prophecy of the pyramid, the alignments of everything in the Queen's Chamber, and how it all connects, if that has any connection to astrology or any application to astrology.
Sorry, carry on, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say it does really in some aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
we've just concentrated mostly on the astronomy and the astronomical data that we think has been encoded.
Yeah, one of the things that I wrote about in an earlier book, it's published in 2006, called the Giza Oracle. It's no longer available. Was that the Great Sphinx is the head of a man and the body of a lion, and I thought at the time, well, that's interesting, because again, that's pointing to the two end points of the precession cycle. Aquarius is the water carrier. Is symbolised, I think, by a man, and the Sphinx is obviously the sign of Leo, the lion. So you've got the age of Leo and then the age of Aquarius, the two opposite ends of this cycle, which are also being indicated to us by the two sets of queens. These are basically in 10,500 or 460, the setting of the queens on the southwest horizon. They were that was in the age of Leo, and roughly 2,500 AD in the future, roughly 500 years from now, the others they will have reached maximum culmination. That's the Khufu queens rising on the east will have reached maximum culmination. That is the age of Aquarius. So there may well be, astrology, the roots of astrology encoded in there also.
Okay, that was really very interesting, because actually. It'd take time, but to put it briefly, I've read, actually seen videos that connected the virgin birth and the whole story of Jesus is an astrological story that ends up with the age of Aquarius, in other words, and you go kind of, makes it sound like you're really onto something with that, in other words. But we got a person in chat, Laser Les, and I'm sorry, Les Schwartz. I got two Les's in the chat room right now. I don't want to mix them up. He was asking, do markers have meanings beyond the astronomical?
The precession markers, well, they do, in the sense that what Gary and I are saying is an overarching theory that we're presenting in our book. There is an overarching theory about why this was all put into place. There's no point in just putting an astronomical clock there and pointing to specific dates. Now that could have been done, on a stone somewhere, or a series of stones. You don't necessarily have to build these monumental structures to convey that kind of information. But what we're saying is that in 3980 BC, the four pillars that the ancient Egyptians believed held up the sky fell, they collapsed, and the sky moved out of its normal place. The stars moved out of their normal place. This essentially was a tilt of the Earth's axis. Something happened to the Earth at that time. We don't know exactly what, but we can see from ancient traditions and ancient texts the effect of that shift of the Earth's axis. We have texts from China, from Hebrew texts, ancient Egyptian texts, all telling us that the sky fell, the Earth tilted. And to the ancient Egyptians, that must have been absolutely horrific. For them to see that the Earth, that the pillars had fallen, and it would have been a bad omen as well, a seriously bad omen to the people of that time, because one of the things the ancient Egyptians believed, and their texts which tell us this, is that they believed that their god Thoth would send a great deluge that would drown the entire kingdom of Egypt. The ancient Egyptians believed that, and there's a text from Solon which says that after the usual interval, the great flood will come, or the waters will come like a pestilence. So there seems to be this knowledge in ancient Egypt that after the usual time, well, how did they know that? How did they understand that? The point here being that when the sky fell, it was a bad omen, and the ancient Egyptians probably didn't know how bad it would get. But we see things like from the time of the king Zoser, who built the step pyramid at Saqqara. Well, that pyramid was the first pyramid ever built, and it was built by his great architect Imhotep. And one of the things that we read also is that one of the texts tells us that the pyramids and temples were built according to an architectural plan that came from the heavens at the time of in the days of Imhotep. It came from the heavens at Saqqara in the days of Imhotep. So this doesn't necessarily mean to say that something fell from the sky. It could simply mean that they took the plan of Orion from the sky and basically had decided to put that on the ground. So basically what the Egyptians were doing is they were essentially expecting the worst in the years ahead. And in Zoser's time, they suffered horrendous droughts, absolute horrendous droughts. This is when we get the famous famine stela. and the land was ravaged by a series of severe droughts, and that went on, and it got worse and worse over the years, eventually culminating in the collapse of the Old Kingdom, and not just the Old Kingdom of ancient Egypt, but various civilizations in the Near East at that time. The Akkadian Empire suffered and collapsed. Numerous city-states at that time collapsed and never rose again. What was remarkable is that ancient Egypt was somehow able to reconstitute itself, was able to recover from this incredible disaster that had befallen the world. There's this incredible sudden climate change that had been the result of a sudden shift of the Earth's axis. So what I'm saying, back to the point that the person was asking about, do the three Queen's Pyramids, the two sets of Queen's Pyramids, have anything more other than astronomical associations? Well, yes, because what we're saying is, how was it possible that the ancient Egyptians could recover whilst most of the other city-states and cultures at that time struggled, and some didn't? They just disappeared from history. How was it the ancient Egyptians were able to do that and come back pretty much in a similar state from where they were after this serious disaster? And what Gary and I realised is that the pyramids weren't just a clock showing when these events happened and may happen again, or happened in the past and may happen again in the future, but that they are what we call recovery vaults, in the sense that they would these chambers within these pyramids weren't designed and built and put there in the pyramids for the purposes of the entombment of a dead king, but rather they weren't so much a tomb of the king, but rather the womb of the kingdom. That's the way Gary and I view what the original purpose of the pre-5th dynasty pyramids were. They stored everything that they possibly could in these structures, expecting the worst for their kingdom. They didn't know what was going to happen, so things were getting really bad. What did they do? Did they do nothing and watch everything just get destroyed, or perhaps washed away, everything washed away in the deluge that their God Thoth promised would be inflicted upon the nation? They didn't know what else could they do. The sky had fallen, it was a bad sign. They were really, really expecting the worst. So what did they do? They could do nothing and be certain, absolutely certain, that the civilization would disappear. Or they could try and do something about it. So what Gary and I's view they decided to do was to build these massive monumental recovery vaults, and these things had to be so vast that they would be visible for miles around. You know, you want people to find them. You want them to find them quick. You know, after the worst of the calamity had subsided and had passed, and the survivors, you want them to find these structures, and you want them to find them quick.
Right.
So that's what we're saying. These structures, the early ones, not all the pyramids were recovery tombs. We think possibly the later ones may have been built as tombs, but certainly we believe that there was a different purpose for the early giant pyramids.
Similar to the Svalbard sea vaults that has been built now.
That's right, yeah.
All right.
So they preserved their culture, and they preserved their foodstuffs and seeds and everything inside the pyramids.
Yeah, I've seen it on the History Channel, I want to say, or one of those channels, National Geographic or something, that our government's doing the exact same thing even as we speak.
Yeah.
So it just makes perfect sense that they did it too.
Yeah, well, if we're doing it, Royce, if we're doing it, and well, what is it we're expecting? Well, we're not actually expecting anything. Well, I don't know if we are. Maybe we are. I don't know. But to the ancient Egyptians, when the sky fell, they had motivation, they had incentive, they had a reason for doing this.
And it also encoded the information in the structures themselves. The information how the sky fell, that it could happen again. It's all been encoded in the layout of Giza.
That's right.
Also, geophysical information. Geophysical information is more kind of encyclopedic, but really we could see what they were trying to say. But you know, it's all to do with the geophysics of the Earth and the orbital dynamics, where this catastrophe could come round in the precessional cycle again and again.
Right, which we also, all the ancients and almost all cultures talk about the great year or the great cycle, and it being attached to the equinox and the solstice is a recurring theme. And then you had one great big huge great year. Yeah.
And these events happen on the beginning and end point of the cycle, and also the halfway point. That's what we're being told.
Just before the beginning and end points of the cycle. The end points are like 2,500. So the clock seems to mark, if we're right, and we accept we could be totally wrong and it's coincidence, but all we're saying,
a few hundred years.
All we're saying is that, well, we found, you know, it seems to encode this line. If you look at the structure in this particular way, it seems to encode this day on the line. We could be wrong, but we're putting it out there. We're saying, make of it what you want, guys, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, also, Laser Les was asking from the chat room, is it possible that Orion gets mirrored? And I'm not sure if people... What was that?
Scott, you're breaking up.
Sorry?
You was breaking up there.
I wasn't saying anything.
Oh. I think something happened when I spoke.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, what I was trying to say was I'm not sure exactly what Laser Les was getting at on that, because I know it's kind of common knowledge from Robert Bauval's work that the pyramids were actually mirroring Orion's belt up there. So I'm wondering, was he asking if that was the case, or did he have something else in mind that I'm not thinking of? But he did ask if if it was mirrored. In other words,
I think Royce, perhaps what Laser Les was maybe alluding to is there's this idea that the pyramids at Giza are the wrong way round in order to properly reflect the Orion belt stars. I'm not sure if that's perhaps what he's getting at, but what Gary and I show, and that argument has been going on ever since Robert Bauval wrote the Orion Mystery with Adrian Gilbert, and it was a astronomer, Dr. Ed Krupp from the Griffiths Observatory, that first suggested or made this critique of the Orion theory. But Gary and I show in our book how Dr. Krupp's argument just doesn't really stack up, and we have presented. There's information in the book, but you can also see some stuff on my website. If you go to my website, go to presentations, you'll find a flash file that you can watch, which explains exactly why the Egyptians could only lay out the pyramids at Giza in exactly the way that they have done in order to properly reflect the belt stars. And you have to basically think of the Giza pyramids in 3 dimensions, not actually flat out on the 2-dimensional plateau. You have to imagine if you're standing north of the Great Pyramid looking south, you have to imagine that all the pyramids, the Great Pyramid is at the bottom, then there's the middle pyramid floating above it slightly to the right, and then the other pyramid, the small pyramid, is floating above that slightly to the right again. But what you can't have on Earth, because gravity won't allow you to float pyramids in the air, but that's the way you have to imagine it. but gravity won't allow you to do that because the stars in the sky, the Orion Belt stars, they're stacked. One star is higher than the next star. So you can't actually physically replicate that on the ground because, as I said, gravity won't allow it. But what you have to do then, because the ancient Egyptian worldview is that south was they're up. Like our modern convention has north as our up. When you look at a map, north is to the top of the map. The ancient Egyptian worldview, when they looked at, if they looked at a map, the south was there up because it was to the south was the source of the sacred Nile. In the south, the sun reached its highest point at the meridian in the southern sky. So it's, all these associations were important to the ancient Egyptians. So south was there up, and that's where you have to look at the Orion, but you have to look at the belt stars, but think of them as in three dimensions, not flat out on the ground.
Right, and that would make perfect sense because you're living in a three-dimensional world. They would probably want to, mimic that and what they were doing. In other words, I would think.
It's an argument. It's an argument that just keeps coming up all the time. You can never really put it to rest. But I think we've done a pretty good job with how we've handled it in the book. But yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those arguments just keep coming up.
Well, I mean, a lot of arguments keep coming up, but I can see why. Like, everybody has their own take on everything.
Yeah.
But what bothers me is some people, they have their own take of things without actually doing the research. Now, as I understand it, y'all have actually been there and investigated yourself. Am I correct?
Well, yeah. I've been to Giza. And done a lot of research out there. I've actually managed even to get into the Sphinx enclosure, which is it's off limits a lot of the time, even to card holding Egyptologists. They just aren't allowed in there, but I managed to get in there, and it was quite an exceptional experience, I have to say. Actually, standing in front of the dream stela that stands between the paws of the Great Sphinx. It's just quite an overwhelming experience. You just can't really fathom it. It's incredible. And I was there also because there's an area there's a theory that I came up with a number of years ago. It's called the Great Giza Triangle. And basically, this also relates back to the recovery vault theory, which is the overarching theory of the book. But this theory suggests that there is a hidden vault. The pyramids were the visible vaults, but there's one vault that they actually hid as well, because they didn't know what kind of people were going to be coming across these vaults. They didn't know what they were going to do once they got inside these vaults, whether they were just going to trash everything looking for treasure or whatever. So what we theorize that they may have done would be to hide one of the vaults out of sight, so that it would take people with more enlightened minds to try and figure out where it was. And they left clues, at Giza. In the Hermetic text, these texts talk about the hidden vault or the hidden books of Osiris, and it says they're hidden away in a secret chamber or secret room, and that these books of secret books of Osiris will be discovered by the three. Now, we don't know what the three is. We really can only guess. Some people think it's three people. Some people think it's three stars. Gary and I think it's the three pyramids. They have these unusual features called concavities G3 and G1, and when you apply simple centroid, what's called centroid geometry to the three pyramids at Giza, it points to a spot to the southwest of the plateau. Now, that's why I went to Giza 2008 to try and get into that particular spot. Now, I mentioned earlier that I could get into the Sphinx enclosure, which, as I said, card-holding Egyptologists can't even get in there. Now, I tried to get into the area where this particular spot, X marks the spot location. I couldn't get in.
Fenced off. It's got, isn't it?
It's all fenced off. There's guards on camels with guns, police, the antiquities police and security guys, all over the place. There's this massive wall. It's called Hawashi's Wall. It goes right across the plateau, right round the plateau, and it's got these security towers where there's police with armed police there. It wasn't looking too promising for me, I have to say, but I just couldn't get in there for love nor money, and I was quite disappointed about that. Now, when I looked at this particular location on Google Earth, I came up with a theory. I think it was December 2009, something. I can't remember the exact date. No, it was before that. I came up with a theory because I was there. I came up with a theory 2007, something like that. Anyway, I posted it online in 2009. I believe it was December 2009. And if you look at Google Earth round about that time, that spot on Google Earth round about that time, nothing is actually happening at that spot. And then all of a sudden, I think 3 months later, 2 or 3 months later, all of a sudden, what do you think happens? They've got the excavators and the earth movers, the tippers, the dumpsters, the big trucks, earth moving equipment there. And that whole area was being dug up. Now, I emailed Zahi Hawass and asked him what's going on, and I didn't get a reply to that. I asked him what the purpose of the wall was, and he says that's to protect guests of Egypt. That was his reply. So I couldn't get in there, and I was quite disappointed. But if you look at that, if you go to my website, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about, or go onto Google Earth, go to the southwest of the plateau, just over Zahi's Wall, and you'll see the whole area is being dug up. This is an area that I identified, a number of years ago.
And that, now, do you have any clues as to when somebody's going to actually be able to open up one of these vaults and see the actual records that's in them?
Well, I mean, this is. I'll say right away, Royce. This is speculation, but it's based on the centroid theory, which points to this location. If you take the three pyramids at Giza, the three, and you apply the centroid technique to those three pyramids, it points to this location. Is it? I identify this. I posted it. I have my own forum on above top secret, Royce, as you know.
Right.
I regularly post on there, and people ask me questions on there. So the theory is well documented on above top secret and also on GrahamHancock.com. But it is a theory. I don't know why they're digging in that location. It could be for any reason, but it's just a remarkable coincidence, I suppose, that a couple of months after I posted the theory on ATS, above top secret, and on GrahamHancock.com, that it's all of a sudden been dug up.
Okay.
It's actually been included. It's been included in the book as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the above top secret, because I saw that in your biography and I forgot to mention it. And I think almost everybody's familiar with the above top secret forum board. I mean, it's been around for years now, much like Graham Hancock's, and it gets a lot of traffic, in other words.
Oh, it's massive, absolutely massive. I think ATS must be one of the largest, most active forums in the world for discussions of alternative history, the mysteries, science, conspiracy theories, you name it.
Yeah, especially conspiracy theories, but you're right, just pretty much everything.
Oh yeah, dreams.
I wanted to mention once again, well, I want to thank everybody for coming. I couldn't have a show without my listeners anymore, and I could have one without my guests, so everybody plays a part in making this show work, and I appreciate everybody's part that they do play in it. And I also wanted to remind everybody that's listening in other places, the website here is www.paranormalpalace.com. If you want to come over here and listen over here, you can join in the live chat. You do have to be a member. It's to protect from spam bots, but the membership is free. We just make sure it's not a bot coming into the room instead of a human, pretty much. And don't forget, you can learn more about Scott at www.scottcreighton.co.uk. And you can learn more about Gary at www.garyosborn.moonfruit.com. And their book is available at Amazon.com for anybody that's interested. And also, I'm linked to it right here on the show page for today. Tomorrow, I'll probably have this moved from the front page to the archives to make room for the next show that's coming up. And just to let everybody know in advance, so you can tell all your friends, the next show is going to be Tuesday night. My guest is going to be Tom Carey, and we're going to be talking about Roswell and other UFO cases, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but I know for a fact we're going to talk about Roswell. And wanted to also ask you, Gary, and you, Scott, both of you, one at a time. Earlier I started out with you, Scott, so why don't I have a start out with Gary this time? Is there anything that you got in that book that I haven't thought to ask about or that hasn't been covered yet that you would like to get out there and cover real quick?
I think my contribution to the book were the angles I found in the Great Pyramid. I don't know whether you've seen anything on the internet about the angle of 23.5 degrees, the Earth's obliquity angle, tilt angle. Have you ever seen any of that?
No, I have personally, but like I say, I haven't had your book either, and I haven't been to Egypt, but.
Yeah, I think right about the time when I was finding these angles in the pyramid, well, just before that, actually, I found the angle of 23.5 degrees in numerous sources, especially paintings from the 17th century. The angle had been encoded in the paintings, and it kind of puzzled me for a while. And it was when I started working with Scott that the answer to it became clear, because Scott kind of looked at it, and because he's got a lateral thinking mind, like myself in some ways, he was able, it's like I had my nose up too close to it, but Scott was able to see, kind of look back, kind of step back and see what it could all mean. And that's actually handled in the first chapter of the book. And we found that the reason why these 23.5 Earth's axis angle has been encoded in these paintings was because of the church. Maybe you could take over on this, Scott, because you came up with the answer, and it's great. It's a great answer.
Yeah. As Gary was pointing out there, Royce, it's all these paintings, but it wasn't just paintings. It's in various other works of art. We find this angle in Masonic stones. The Mason's keystone conveys these angles as well. But essentially, what we felt, or I felt, was being said was, as Gary pointed out, was to do with the church. Now, what we have to say here as well is that it seems that this key angle, 23.5 degrees, the angle of the Earth's obliquity, is that Gary found that in a sort of concentrated period of history.
17th century.
Yeah, 17th century. Mainly, this angle kept popping up more than in any other sort of periods. So it was an anomaly to find this angle, and this angle would be found in spears and staffs of shepherd staffs and swords and all sorts of things. Gary will be able to give you a better idea of that.
Yeah, I mean, I found them in so many different sources. I mean, we could only produce a few examples in the book because of, lack of space to deal with them all. But I'm still researching into this. I've just found this angle, swords, staffs, spears. You see them all pointing at or leaning at this angle.
Yep.
And even the $1 bill, the US $1 bill with the pyramid, with the the eye in the pyramid. The pyramid is actually at the angle of 23.5 degrees. So there you can see like a relationship between the Earth's axis angle and the Great Pyramid. And that's when I started looking into the pyramid, and I found the angle there as well.
Yeah, the portrait of George Washington, the famous portrait of George Washington, his sword and is angled at 23.5 degrees as well. And I don't know if Gary wants to jump in here, but
it's mostly a Masonic kind of encodement. That's what we're saying. But it's also been a tradition with many artists throughout history, it seems. As I say, especially from the 17th century, because around that time, the church were really clamping down on the heretics, and Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600, and that kind of sent... Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, it's just I'm hearing a bit of interference at the moment. Okay, Bruno. Yeah. Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600, and that kind of sent out a message through Europe that heretics should be. What I mean is that all the information just went underground from that point, and a lot of this information was then encoded in the paintings. Guys, I'm just hearing a bit of interference. It's just putting me off a bit. Okay,
I'll take over, Gary. Essentially, what Gary is saying is that it was known since the time of Copernicus that the Earth was tilted and rotated on an axis and went round the sun. The church wouldn't have any of that. They believed in the heliocentric. They believed in Ptolemaic view of the solar system and the universe, whereby the Earth was at the centre and everything went around the Earth and these imagined celestial spheres. But Copernicus said no, the Earth rotated and it went round the sun. It was tilted at an angle of 23.5 degrees. Now, to say that and come out and say that to the church, you would be burned at the stake, or it was heresy, and people like Galileo, with his book, the Two Chief World Systems, was essentially perpetuating and distributing the writings and ideas of Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish priest, and basically the church decided to clamp down on Galileo. And as Gary pointed out, Bruno was burned at the stake for having similar ideas. And the point being that any person of science who believed in this model of science of the universe basically were clamped down upon by the church. And so what essentially we believed happened was that this knowledge went underground with masons and artists. They had to hide their secrets or their knowledge from the gaze of the church. But the irony of it is that the Masonic keystone encompasses these very angles of 23.5 degrees, and the Masons put this right under the noses of the church by building all their magnificent cathedrals using the keystone with this angle built right into the keystone. So all these great churches and cathedrals all over Europe express this angle in their keystones. So it was almost as if the angle of 23.5 degrees, you know how like the cross, the crucifix, the cross is a symbol to Christians of Christ and the resurrection. And a religious faith, the angle of 23.5 degrees, whether it was expressed by using a sword or a spear in art or whatever, that was used by people of science and artists to express the scientific truth of the universe. So this angle of 23.5 degrees was like a sign, it was a symbol, and that is why Gary has probably, at the time, the Masons were supposed to be coming to prominence, found these angles in all these places, because this is the time when that knowledge was being clamped upon by the church, and so people had to find a means of communicating that knowledge and passing it on.
But they didn't. They actually burnt the knowledge, because any knowledge that didn't agree with church doctrine could not be allowed to, prosper, in other words.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally hundreds of these examples of this reference to 23.5 degrees. I mean, I've been sent posts, emails from people telling me what they found ever since I put it out on the internet years ago, So there's hundreds of cases, hundreds of examples of this. And it's just, I suppose people are just coming to it now on the internet.
Yeah. The thing to say also here, Royce, is that, yes, there's this angle of 23.5 degrees, which is the angle of the Earth's obliquity. But we feel, and we say in our book that there was more knowledge associated with that, and it's possible that knowledge of the Earth's obliquity went right back into ancient times.
Okay. Yeah, now, are y'all referring to 23.5 longitude or latitude?
No, this is the Earth's axis. This is the angle of the Earth's axis, the axis of obliquity. The Earth is tilted at 23.5. So it's not to do with the Earth being tilted.
Because I did a 23.5 Google search just now on latitude, like an idiot that I'm being at the moment. But interestingly enough, it came up with the Tropic of Capricorn. Go figure that one.
See, yeah,
well, that's right.
No. This angle is it seems to be related directly with the Earth's obliquity angle, which is the tilt angle of the Earth. And as Scott said, the Church believed that the Earth was at the centre of the universe and that there was no tilt, that it was perfectly upright. But the people who knew different, the scientifically minded people, who were being hounded by the Church, they encoded this angle, the artists did, who also were in the know, the scientific knowledge, even esoteric knowledge, it was all mixed up together. They encoded this angle in their art and in their paintings and other sources. And as I say, the pyramid on the $1 bill, in the Great Seal of the United States, the pyramid there is angled at 23.5 degrees. And this is what I found, is that it's not just the angle, but there's this connection with the Great Pyramid of Giza. And we find that angle in the Great Pyramid as well.
Yeah,
and not just that angle, but other angles that show that the Great Pyramid is actually pointing to its own location on the Earth. I mean, it's a major discovery, I think. So that's all in the book as well. And I'm still researching this. I'm still doing a lot of research into it, even though Scott has provided the answer.
I can tell you also that not just this 23-degree Earth axis angle, but there have been many other things that was hidden in the frescoes, the ceilings of churches, even the ceiling of the Capitol building here in America. If you look outside of a building, you could see statues of things that all tell messages of times from back in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like flaunting it in front of any Christians that, this is information that's still alive. You burnt the books, but you couldn't stop the message, in other words.
Yeah, yeah.
Which goes to show, if the pyramids were just tombs, then why do you have all the symbolism associated with the pyramids, the Masonic symbolisms, the pyramids, obelisks, all from ancient Egypt? It's endemic. And so if they were just tombs, why is there so much esoteric symbolism associated with it that points to some kind of higher knowledge? Yeah?
Yeah, one of the things is that the Gary and I are saying in our book is that the pyramids, the Old Kingdom, the giant pyramids were built as a preservation system. They preserved artifacts, they preserved useful artifacts that would be needed, whether it's pots, vases, plates, tools, weapons, seeds, barley, wheat. This would all be stored in these, but they're not just preserving these items, and they're preserving an astronomical. Yeah, I was just come to that, Gary. Yeah, they're preserving the calendar of the cycle, and they're preserving knowledge in these structures. It's a complete preservation machine or mechanism for preservation. And this, this is what the Egyptologists say as well. The pyramids were for preservation of the king. What Gary and I are saying is, well, no, it's preservation of the kingdom.
That's interesting. I do know, though, that there is an old tradition. I seem to be having trouble now.
Yeah, perhaps we should call you, Royce. Perhaps we should call you on the phone.
I don't know what's going on with this. This happened earlier, but it stopped on its own.
Right, okay. I don't think it's me this time.
Okay. Maybe we weren't meant to have this in peace.
Right, so where do we go from there then?
I was just going to mention real quick, ordinarily I don't have any problem with my equipment, but then too, you know how sunspots can come up on some days, so it's hard to say what's really going on. But I was going to also, Scott, did you get a chance, because I know we asked Gary, to mention anything that we haven't covered in the book that was from your contribution?
Oh boy, I think I've kind of covered most of the sort of key aspects of the book that I contributed, but there's so much new and intuitive knowledge in this book. One thing I will say that hasn't actually been mentioned is that the foreword for the book was written by Graham Hancock, and Graham, and that's a great endorsement personally for myself, and I'm sure it is for Gary as well.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that Graham says right away is that it is rare. There are thousands of books about Egypt that have been written, and there's lots more being written every year. But it is rare, very rare, that any of these new books have anything original or different or anything useful to add to the story of Giza. The book, The Giza Prophecy by Scott and Gary, is a rare exception to that. So that for me, I would just say that, because for me that is a great endorsement from one of the best known and writers in this field in the world.
Okay. And once again, everybody, if y'all are interested in picking up the book, you can get it at Amazon. It's also going to be linked to from my show. And I'm going to be putting this show up on YouTube, MetaCafe, Daily Motion, and I have my own podcast as well that I'll be putting it up on. And y'all can share the links and get around and, make sure everybody gets a chance to hear this. And I'm going to go ahead, I think for now, if you guys don't have anything else you'd like to cover, call this show a wrap, for now, at least anyway. But I'd like to invite you guys to come back to my show again in the future, maybe one at a time, maybe both at a time.
Yeah, great.
It'd be a pleasure, Royce.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure, yeah.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you guys, and I'll be sending you guys the links as soon as I get them, or I'll send them to you, Scott, and you can forward them to Gary, because I don't have Gary's email.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Okay. And do y'all have any last-minute thoughts y'all like to share real quick?
Yeah, just that this is a complex subject to discuss. Can be difficult because of the geophysical information. And there's so much more that we're still researching, me and Scott. Hopefully there might be a follow-up. So
I was about to say, you might have another book on it.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much out there, to write about. But yeah, I would just like to say that, to give this book a chance, just get your head around the ideas in this book, because, Robert Bauval, he opened the door, and, hopefully Gary and I are adding a few more of the pieces to the whole Orion subject and the true purpose of what these early giant pyramids were all about.
Okay. And also, guys, if you don't mind me putting in a plug real quick, I get a lot of referrals from United Paranormal International. They're a great, group of folks over there at UnitedParanormalInternational.ning. It's a social network. It's got researchers from all over the world, ghost hunters, ufologists, cryptozoologists, you name it. They pretty much cover everything. They have groups, forums, chat. A great place to share information and to actually get to know people of a like mind with similar information. And I know they're going to put a plug in for me every now and then, and I know I usually announce my shows over there, so I like to kind of mention them while I'm at it. And also I put you guys' links in the chat room as well. I think it was like twice during the show at least. And I want to, like I say, I thank you guys for coming. It's been a pleasure having you. Folks, don't forget to come back Tuesday to hear me talk with Tom Carey about Roswell. And want to thank you guys. And we're going to go ahead and call this here a wrap. And, Scott, Gary, I hope to see you again in the future. Y'all have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Royce.
Good weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Cheers, man.
Talk to you soon. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Scott Creighton and Gary Osborn. And the topic we're going to be discussing is the search of the lost knowledge of the ancients. And they're going to tell us a lot about this here, because a lot of it has been covered in a book that they co-authored called The Giza Prophecy. And I myself have not had the pleasure of reading the book, although I read the description of it, and it appears to be some very interesting work, and it's some work that Graham Hancock seems to like as well. They can tell us a little bit more about it than I'm going to be able to do it. So why don't I introduce them real quick, and then we'll get them to kind of introduce themselves. Scott and Gary, y'all are with me, right?
Hi, Royce.
Yep. Hi,
Okay.
Royce.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Gary. It's a pleasure to have you guys here. I want to thank y'all for coming.
It's a pleasure
be
to be here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you guys too. I guess we could start, Scott, with you since you got the picture on the top. Why don't you tell everybody, basically, how did you get interested in doing this research in ancient mysteries in the Giza Pyramid?
Well, Royce, it's kind of a long story. Basically, I've been interested in this field of our past for many years. I think probably ever since I was a small boy. Always been fascinated with the pyramids of ancient Egypt, Mexico, other ancient sites around the world. But it probably wasn't until about 10 years ago, round about that time, that I really got really interested in the whole mystery of ancient Egypt and the Great Pyramids of the Old Kingdom. Absolutely fascinated with them, started reading more about them, read Robert Bauval's fascinating Orion mystery with his co-author at the time, Adrian Gilbert. Went on to read Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. So I've had a fair diet of all those authors, including other people like Michael Bajan, Ian Lawton, Rand Flemath, all these really interesting guys. But for me, it kind of started actually in a funny kind of way. I was writing a screenplay at the time for a film or a 2-hour television drama, and it was actually about the Holy Grail and the Knights Templar, and it particularly brought in part of the research for it was centred around Roslin Chapel, which is just about 30 miles up the road from where I live. So I went to Roslin Chapel one glorious Sunday afternoon, fabulous sunny day, and I was there with a friend, and we managed to climb up to the roof of Roslin Chapel, which not many people get the opportunity to do. But it was being renovated at the time, so there was a lot of scaffolding around the building. And so we were kind of wandering about the roof of Roslin Chapel, and I noticed in the southeast corner of that chapel, way up in the roof, and you would never see this, obviously from the ground, but way up in the southeast corner of Roslin Chapel, there's these three small sort of conical shape or almost pyramid shape stones, and they were arranged in the same pattern as the pyramids at Giza, and I thought, wow, that's quite a coincidence. And of course, Giza would be to the southeast of where Roslin is, and these pyramids were in the southeast corner of the Roslin Chapel. So I thought, I wonder why that is, and that intrigued me for a number of months. I started reading more and more about the mystery that Giza really is, and that's really how I kind of stumbled in to this whole thing.
I see. Well, you've certainly done a lot of research into it, though, and it's been a big part of your life for quite a few years now, hasn't it?
It has, but probably not as long as Gary. I have to say.
Well, Gary, I think that's your cue to tell us how you got your interest in this here field, and maybe even how you and Scott decided to come together on this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've been a writer on mysticism and esoteric traditions for well over 15 years now. Written and co-written various articles covering subjects relating to ancient mysteries, esoteric traditions, alchemy, mysticism, ancient shamanism. So to put it in a nutshell, I'm interested in the nature of reality and human consciousness, always have been, especially altered states of consciousness. And of course this links in with the so-called paranormal side of things, which I've always had an interest in. But the Giza and the pyramids there, I mean, it's always been a sideline of my research until I made a discovery in around about 2001. where I really focused on it. Anyway, in 2003, I corresponded with Philip Gardner, another author, and he asked me if I wanted to co-author a book with him. He sent me the manuscripts he was working on. Anyway, I agreed, and we did 2 books together, The Serpent Grail in 2005 and The Shining Ones in 2006. After that, I kind of dropped out of the literary scene for a while, although I still carried on with my research and tested the reaction to certain theories and discoveries of mine on various discussion forums, which is where Scott comes in. I've known Scott now since 2006, when we were both posting on Graham Hancock's website forum. And he and I noted that what we were researching kind of paralleled and working along similar lines, and that certain discoveries or theoretical aspects from both our work associated with Giza was complementary, as if we each had some of the jigsaw pieces of this particular puzzle.
Yeah.
So I guess it was inevitable that Scott and I would one day be working together. And in 2009, we chatted over the phone and decided that we both work together on a book. And in the last months of the project, we approached author Graham Hancock, and he worked closely with us to make sure that all the research was sound and that he could endorse it. All of which resulted in the book, Giza Prophecy. It's just been published and with a foreword by Graham. So that's what takes us up to the present day.
So this book has had peer review by its the peers in your field, in other words, or at least one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've talked to Philip Gardner maybe once or twice in my time. I've invited him to my show, but at the time I did, he had a sore throat or was having trouble speaking or something of that nature. And then by the time I got back to him, he was bogged down with his TV show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's right.
But
that was. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was probably right about the time when I think that must have been about 2006, when after the book The Shining Ones had been published, and I kind of dropped out of the scene for a while, kind of a bit disillusioned with it really. But I was always researching, and so after meeting Scott, it kind of renewed my interest in the Giza pyramids, and he had something to offer, which I thought I needed to kind of wed my research to, and it's resulted in this book.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, this here's an area of study for me. It has been for many, many, many years. I think it's very fascinating. Kind of like you, Gary, I kind of lean toward the mysticism of the Hermetic tradition and alchemy, and that seems to be a better path for me than religion, in other words.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in a lot of my previous work, and even in the research I'm doing at present, I tend to lean more to the esoteric side. However, to change the view, to change the way we view the pyramids, especially that which we've been indoctrinated with, the established mainstream view that we've been taught in school, Scott and I realised that the only way a so-called alternative history researcher or writer is going to make a change and breach the orthodox wall, so to speak, is to meet the mainstream thinkers and Egyptologists in their own field. In other words, write a serious, well-researched book with good, reliable sources that leans more on the down-to-earth, kind of left-brain, pragmatic side of things, while at the same time meeting them head-on by asking some hard questions about the things they have ignored and cleverly sidestepped these past 150 years or so. Okay. There are many anomalies about the Giza pyramids presented in the book that have been highlighted and expressed clearly, things that need to be addressed and things that these people really can't wriggle out of us, as we have closed many loopholes and have dealt with most, if not all, of their half-baked explanations that are just as ridiculous as some of the claims made by the alternative camp.
Yeah, I've heard some of the explanations, especially from Zoe Hollis, that I thought were kind of out there, shall we say. Yeah,
but there's always a point of balance, see? But when you write a book like this, you really cannot avoid being stereotyped and placed on one side of the field in a conflict that's been going on for decades, between the views that have been established by Egyptologists and the views, claims and beliefs presented by the alternative theorists. Anyway, Scott and I do see the book as a rallying point for the alternative community, and it deals with some of the very difficult questions in the field of Egyptology. However, the ironic thing is, right, Royce, right now, and which has